Certainly are thankful that you have chosen to be a part of Faith or Daily Focus today. And we're looking forward to a continued study. We're going to be dealing with a subject today that everyone deals with. At some point, everyone has had to deal with anger. Everyone has had to deal with the emotion that has been stirred up, that either my rights have felt like they were violated, or my wishes were ignored, or my space was invaded, or whatever it is that causes you to get ticked off. We've had to deal with those emotions, and maybe you've even had to deal with it today and before this morning. And so some of you have had a pretty good day, at least dealing with your anger, but you've only been up 15 minutes. But for the most of us, we can certainly relate to a temper. We can relate to being angry. I've often used the phrase, no one can make you mad. People can do a lot of things to you, and then we make decisions. Oftentimes we make the decision to be angry. We make the decision to react or to respond. And sometimes we do it very selfishly and sometimes very carnally. But those are our decisions. But yet, I even make the statement, that made me mad, or they really made me mad. And at the end of the day, they really didn't. They probably did something that was out of bounds, but my response to them was really my responsibility. Somehow, though, we feel better about pushing the blame onto someone else, especially if we know they were wrong. However, their wrongdoing does not justify a wrong response on my part. And that's where it really begins to create problems for us. And so I'm going to reread a couple of verses that we read yesterday and then finish this chapter. It says in verse number 27, "An ungodly man diggeth up evil, and in his lips there is a burning fire. A froward man soweth strife, and a whisperer separateth chief friends. A violent man enticeth his neighbor and leadeth him into the way that is not good. He shutteth his eyes to devise froward things. Moving his lips, he bringeth evil to pass. The hoary head is a crown of glory, if it be found in the way of righteousness. He that is slow to anger is better than the mighty, and he that ruleth his spirit than he that taketh a city. The lot is cast into the lap, but the whole disposing thereof is of the Lord." So there's a couple of things in this text. Obviously, Proverbs loves to jump around, but they are related. And it starts out with this idea that God calls the person who digs up evil a wicked person. He calls them an ungodly man. And there's nothing godly, there's nothing Christ-like, there's nothing spiritual about feeling like you've got to drum up dirt. We usually justify it on the basis that this person is standing in my way, this person has told me no and I need to discredit them, this person poses a threat to me and my popularity, so I've got to cut them down a notch, and I've got to have something in order to get even. I've got to have some information to settle the score. So this person who is ungodly, ruled by their flesh, most of the time that a person wants to dig up evil, it's because in their heart is anger. They have a temper problem. And in their temper, they're figuring out a way to make this person pay. And most people that are having a great day do not go, you know what, I think I'm going to try to find dirt on that person. And they're having a wonderful, joyous day filled with blessing. Things are all going right. And they think, I'm just going to try to find some dirt on somebody. I mean, that just doesn't happen. That's just not the way we live life. But somebody make you mad, or someone who has offended you in some way, and you are now angry, yeah, I'll get even. And if I've got something, I can hold over their head. The other side of it is if I need them, we see this in politics where they find some dirt on somebody to manipulate them, to really blackmail them into a behavior. We find that going on. And God says that's just wickedness. And so then he goes on and says, this anger that leads to that kind of behavior is really a divider, and it really separates people that were good friends and may never be at that level of friendship again. Well, then he gets into this idea of a violent man. And these are people who are just selfish. They usually use anger in a way to get their own way, or they use fear in order to get their way. So whether they're abusers, whether they emotionally abuse, or they verbally abuse, or even physically abuse, in order to get people to do what they want, this idea of a violent man enticeth his neighbor. In other words, it's easy to say, wow, how did that guy get ahead in business? How did he get to that level of income? And many times it's this abuse of power. Many times it's this running over people, keeping everyone on their heels, making everyone walk on eggshells because you're a controller, and that's how you advance yourself. And that's the idea. Sometimes the advancement of somebody is appealing, and sometimes people try to mimic or model that same behavior in order to try to get the same result. And that's what verse 29 is talking about. And then he leadeth him into a way that is not good. In other words, he begins to use speech in a way to get him on board with whatever it is that he's serving himself selfishly. And then he shutteth his eyes. In other words, he is constantly figuring out who he can get advantage of. He's always scheming as to how he can get the upper edge. Oftentimes that's rooted in anger as well. When a person can't fall asleep because of what somebody has done, and they're trying to figure out how do they get even? How do they get this person out of their way? How do they make this person hurt the way they hurt? And they can't even go to sleep because of the fact that their heart is so moved with anger and so cluttered with a temper and bad thoughts and bitterness. And then they bring it to pass by the way they talk. They talk people into things. They share misinformation or partial information in order to get people on board with their scheme that they've been devising overnight. And this is what God calls an ungodly, wicked person. And so then he comes in and kind of a verse right out of the blue. It says the hoary head is a crown of life. It's a crown of glory to you if they walk in the way of righteousness. So the gray-haired person is to be a wise person. I think it fits in the context because in my ministry I have found that the older people usually don't jump on emotional things. They're not easily swayed. They've seen this before. They've watched this play out before. This is not new. Oh, maybe the issue is new. The agenda is not new. The strategy's not new. They've seen all of this before, whether it's at the workplace, at the office, at the church, in the family. They tend to be pretty stable. And God says that's a great source to go to for wisdom and to stand against this idea of, is this really going to play out to my benefit to exercise anger and violence in order to get my way? Something I think would be good for our nation to evaluate at this point. But then he says, he that is slow to anger is better than the mighty, and he that can rule his spirit than an armed city. He's really this idea that the soldiers were admired for their protection. And God says you want to protect your reputation. You want to protect God's reputation. You want to have a good testimony. You want to really be spiritual and godly in your life. You really want to stay on the path of wisdom. Then here's how you do it. You rule your spirit. In other words, you don't give in to your flesh. You discipline your thinking. You don't allow your mind to wander. You don't think on things that offended you. You don't ponder things that hurt. You just don't allow it. You discipline your mind. And then verse 33, another verse kind of seems out of the way, but it just says, nothing happens by chance. So the things that God has brought into our life is really brought in for our good and His glory. It's not just a chance. God is really working these things in our life for something that needs to be done. And we can trust Him even in the difficult things. And so we need to rule our spirit. We need to cease from anger. That's my admonition today. That's the little fuel for life that we can apply. May God bless you. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow.